All right, guys. So here's the quick rundown. Let me go ahead and tell you where we are in the story. Let me give you the lore, basically. The issue that we're having here is the Mexican president does not at all have any interest in renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Trump suggests that we should be doing that. In my head, I'm like, okay. But the rundown is, all right, we only touch the Gulf of Mexico in a couple of states. We're talking about Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, no, Georgia, Florida, right? Versus Mexico, they have a much bigger, like, coastline there, right? So I don't know why that would be a thing, but the Gulf of America does sound pretty. But that's just because it's coming from an American, I'd say, right? But all jokes aside, guys, it's always fun trolling the world leaders. Why not? Because they don't get trolled enough, okay? And we have pretty much the greatest troll in the history of trolls entering into the presidency. This is going to be interesting. Right? So the Mexican president basically responds by saying, you know what, listen, if we're going to go ahead and call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, then we're just going to call America Mexican America. How about that? And she just released this information, and that's interesting. I don't like it. We're not ever going to do that. And obviously, all of this is stemming from, Trump basically telling Mexico, if you do not stop illegal immigration and along with the narcotic usage, then we're just going to throw tariffs at you until you fix your problems here. Then obviously, also the Mexican president is also moderately upset because we're now calling Mexico a narco state. Who runs Mexico? The cartels, right? Referring to the fifth largest employer in Mexico is the cartel. Guys, think about that for a second. All right. So yeah, we're calling them a narco state. We're also now finding multiple tunnels, coming from the Mexican border to the United States of America. Again, we're just going to keep calling them that until they fix the actual problem in their country. You're letting, these individuals basically run rampant in your country. What are you expecting us to do in this instance? So yeah, we're calling them a narco state. Mexican president, she is incredibly angry. She's moderately irate at this. That's basically the whole backstory. That's what's going on here. We want to call it the Gulf of America. Doesn't make much sense, but it's funny to hear out loud, right? They want to call us Mexican America. Okay? I'm sure they can probably do that on their maps, though. Like, I'm pretty sure we can just say, you know what? We're not going to call it the Gulf of Mexico anymore. We're going to go ahead and call it the Gulf of America. Do something. That type of thing, right? It's plausible, and the reason why I'm saying it's also plausible is because, guys, how many countries are there on Earth? Right? Like, depending on where you are and what country you're in, will basically dictate how many countries actually are recognized by the country you're in. So it's not irregular, let's say, for these type of things to happen. Also, what day is the first day of the week? That also changes country to country. Okay, I think in the United States of America, it's Sunday, let's say, and then in Spain, it is Monday, for example. Right, that's day number one, if I recall at least. But either way, guys, it's not uncommon for countries to just decide how they want to view the other countries. Right, so, bro, Mexico, if you want to go ahead and call the United States of America Mexican America, okay. Right? Do your thing. do your thing, I guess, right? And if we want to call the Gulf of Mexico Gulf of America, all right. Sure thing. Just a thought here, guys. All right. But all right, let's go ahead and jump to this video immediately. I don't know what just happened here. Mexican president responds to Trump's remarks about changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico. This is a suggestion via Discord. Let's do it.
Start with you, Patrick, and the response by Mexico's president, very specifically to the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. That is very specifically what Donald Trump said he would do.
Yes, and
that
of
delay
course,
is crazy.
The legality of that, the American president just can't rewrite names on maps necessarily. But Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum was asked about it in her daily briefing today, and while it is certainly insulting to many Mexicans that this body of water that their entire lives, throughout modern history has been called the Gulf of Mexico would somehow be magically renamed renamed the Gulf of America. She had some fun with it at the press conference and actually sort of poked fun at Donald Trump and actually came back with her own suggestion for what this body of water could be renamed as. So I think this is some of the frustration you're hearing about the region that President Trump, as he did during his first term, or soon to be President Trump, as he did during his first term, kind of brings his own facts into the equation. And certainly that has been the frustration in Panama, where, of course, the canal now for 25 years, nearly 25 years, has been in Panamanian hands. It is being run by Panama, despite what President Trump says that somehow China calls the shots on Panama. U.S. officials over the years have said that while they are concerned by China's rising influence in Panama and the region, certainly there's no hard proof that China runs the Panama Canal. It is Panama's canal to run, and has actually been expanded more than
This guy reminds me of someone who probably said the entirety of Biden's presidency that no, everything is fine, right? Everything is fine. He's completely coherent. Yeah. He reminds me of someone that would say that. I'm just going to be honest, but let's continue.
Double the number of ships now goes through the expanded post-Panamax canal. So it is very clearly Panama's to run, even if Donald Trump feels that, however, by force or by economic coercion, he could somehow take it back, the so-called bad deal of Jimmy Carter's. But this is an issue that unites all Panamanians and certainly many people in the region that remember the years of gunboat diplomacy where the U.S. sort of took over states that it disagreed with or where it saw economic importance. So, whether it's Greenland or Mexico or Panama, a lot of pushback today from these comments by President-elect Donald Trump.
President-elect Donald Trump is insisting that the United States should expand its territory, calling for Canada to become the 51st state, threatening to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And world leaders are standing up to Trump's suggestions that he might even use military force to take over Greenland and the Panama Canal.
Guys, what is this? Like, you can't see the forest through the trees. You can't, at all. You're taking this. Okay. Let's go.
Just as a matter of principle, for us it is clear the sovereignty of states has to be respected.
You are asking me if I think the United States will invade Greenland? The answer is no. Have we entered an era that sees the return of the survival of the fittest? The answer is yes. And so, should we let ourselves be intimidated? Should we let worry take over? Of course not.
Greenland is not.
See, that guy's intelligent. I'm going to be honest here. Why? Okay, guys. The person who seriously thinks, okay, that he's going to use some type of military force to take these things, are you joking? You can't be that dense.
Mega. Greenland is not going to be mega.
La soberanía de nuestro canal no es negociable. Las únicas manos que controlan el canal son panameñas y así seguirá siendo.
Obviously.
I mean, listen, if we're getting a bad deal in Panama, specifically via the Panama Canal, then I think it's just time that if we are delivering any type of aid to Panama, it should stop immediately. Right? If we're getting a bad deal, that's exactly what should happen. And that's exactly what should happen around the world. The way the American citizens are taxed to the point where we have enough money to literally waste giving to other countries, then either you need to lower our taxes, okay, or stop giving money to countries that are giving us bad deals.
The name Gulf of Mexico is recognized by the United Nations, by a
Yes,
United
we're
Nations
aware.
agency. Why don't we call it Mexican America? It sounds nice, right?
Okay. But again, this is the same thing that I was kind of pointing out earlier regarding how many countries there are on Earth. Different places say that there are different amount of countries. That's the reality of the situation. You can talk about the UN all you want. The UN does not acknowledge every single country on Earth.
Let's discuss with Republican Senator Pete Ricketts of Nebraska. Senator, thank you so much for being with us. Would you be comfortable with sending U.S. troops, as President Trump suggested yesterday he is considering, to take over what is effectively sovereign land?
Well, I think you all are missing the bigger picture here of what President Trump is trying to do. He's thinking about the long-term security of the Western Hemisphere.
Here, guys, I'm going to give you the information. 256, but only 195 are recognized, depending on where you're coming from. There's another number, 243, 239. Guys, there's an issue here, all right? We do not acknowledge things, so it's not the hardest thing in the world to be like, you know what? Just for us, on our map, we're going to say this. I'm not saying this is a good or a bad idea. I'm just saying that it's literally an option. There's nothing to talk about when it comes to legality. This is just something that says something on a map.
We know, for example, the Russian and now Chinese are looking at the Arctic and how they can exploit that. That obviously concerns not only us, but everybody in the Western Hemisphere. And he's thinking about our long-term protection. Same thing with regard to Panama. We know that the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Republic of China has positions, owns ports on both sides of that canal, and that puts us at risk in a potential conflict. So he's thinking about the long-term security, and he's starting a negotiation. And that's what this is about. And I guarantee you there's a lot more people today thinking about the risks that the Russians posed to us through that Northwest Passage than were just a couple of days ago.
So I do want to ask you about what you mentioned, that Hong Kong-based company that owns seaports on both sides of the Panama Canal. But I do want to go back to the question, because Trump is putting out there the idea that the U.S. military might be involved in some kind of foreign entanglement over sovereign territory. How do you square that with his campaign promises about keeping the U.S. out of needless wars?
Well, I think
that's actually a good question. That's a really good question, actually, surprisingly.
Actually happening is the press asked him if there was anything he was going to take off the table, and as a negotiator, he said, no,
like
nothing is going to be taken off the table,
strategically
because
worded
that's the way Trump negotiates. And by the way, I might point out that when he was president before, he did an outstanding job of negotiating different trade agreements, buying more of our agricultural product.
Did you just cut that man's mic?
Because of his trade negotiating style. So it really gets back to President Trump is beginning a negotiation. He's also trying to think long term about the threats to this country and keep us safe. And that is what he's talking about when he's talking about Greenland or the Panama Canal. How do we keep this country safe long term from some of the threats we see from countries like Russia and the People's Republic of China?
Sure. I do wonder about the approach, though, Senator, because there is the risk of alienating allies. And to your point about Chinese influence over shipping and port operations around the world, it is a risk, especially if they weaponize supply chains, which they have shown a willingness to do.
And so if you understand that that's a truth, then why are you confused about Panama Canal? Bro, make up your mind.
That Hong Kong-based company that owns those seaports at both ends of the canal, those are private infrastructure investment.
There's nothing private about a company that's being ran by China, okay? There's nothing private about that, okay? What are you talking about?
And Chinese firms have done this all over Latin America, all over Africa as well. I'm sure this isn't news to you. I wonder if you think the U.S. would gain more in competing with Beijing by expanding those same kind of investments, making more partners, rather than bullying, hinting that we'll use force if we don't get what we want.
It is a mistake to believe that any sort of private company in China is actually private the way we think of it here in the United States. It's simply not true. Under Chinese law, every Chinese company has to do whatever the central government wants it to do. It's called communism.
Right.
It's something China has been governed under for decades.
This is the second time, guys, really quickly. The first time he said communist China, the look on this man's face, he was like, oh, right? Now, the second time he said it again, he's like, what are you talking about?
Decades. And just because they've changed some of the ways they've done things doesn't mean that every Chinese company doesn't have to do what the central government does. So the fact that these are under Hong Kong companies doesn't mean anything. They would have to do exactly what the Chinese government would tell them to do.
On the question of the approach to these foreign countries, is it better to suggest that you might send your military to Panama, or potentially suggest that there might be a way that we could work together on infrastructure projects to maintain U.S. influence in this hemisphere?
I think that, first of all, again, people are missing the bigger picture. President Trump was asked if anything was on the table, and he said everything's on the table. That is where a lot of this is coming from. And yes, absolutely, we have to do a better job of getting out there and telling our story of making our investments, making sure that we're targeting our investments and our aid to countries that are helping us out and doing.
Stop all that aid, bro. Please don't have conversations about aid. There are massively impoverished people in this country. There are people suffering. All right. Healthcare is the way it is, bro. We have so many issues. Okay. Please let's stop talking about aid to other countries.
More, for example, in Africa to be able to combat what China is doing there.
Bad loans.
Panama Canal is another example. Yes, we have to do a better job. This Biden-Harris administration has utterly failed us on foreign policy. Their appeasement-first approach has left us less safe. We have to do a better job in this next administration.
Senator, I do want to get to quickly the fact that Trump is set to meet with Senate Republican leaders later today. I imagine he's going to try to persuade some folks on his cabinet picks. I know you met with Pete Hegseth last month. Are you prepared to vote to confirm him for defense secretary?
Every one of the cabinet secretaries has a process that they're going to go through and follow. One step is meeting with the senators, such as Pete meeting with me. And then, well, they'll go through a public hearing process, and then we'll have the vote. So we need to let the entire process play out. But I got to tell you, I had a very good conversation with Pete Hegseth, and I look forward to hearing what his public hearing is going to be like, and that's what will be true for all the cabinet nominees.
So you are reserving, awaiting that confirmation process to decide whether you will vote or not for Hegseth?
Well, we have a process that every one of the candidates will go through, every one of the cabinet nominees will go through. We need to allow that process to play out. It includes meetings such as senators with me, but also the public hearing as well. And that's going to be important for all the cabinet nominees.
Senator Pete Ricketts, I wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we have to leave the conversation there. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective.
No, you don't.
Great. Thanks, Boris.
Yeah, guys, listen. That was definitely a great interview. There were a couple of like really good questions, but then it kind of went off the rails, guys. It did slightly, but I do think that the senator did definitely answer to the best of his ability within this ecosphere. Let's say, guys. All right, but all right, guys. Listen, what do you guys think? Is it going to be the Gulf of America, guys? Let me know, because I don't know why we would do such a thing. I think there's a lot more, let's say, important things that we could be doing and worrying about, let's say. But we can just call it Gulf of America. Whatever. It's not a big deal. It's a name. I don't care about names. I don't care what you call things. I care what they are. You get what I mean? But either way, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. The fact that you just made it to the end of the video says a whole lot, actually. We have a couple other channels. Mr. L. Boyd Music, Mr. L. Boyd Movie Reacts, along with Mr. L. Boyd Discusses, where I just generally speak about the things that specifically matter to me. But in the meantime, I'll catch you guys later.